The stars stretched endlessly across the black void of space, cold and silent. The Terran resistance fleet drifted near the edge of the Orion Nebula, their ships battered, their numbers small. Humanity was on the brink of destruction. The Xarkari Empire, a ruthless alien race, had pushed them to the edge, crushing one colony after another. On the command deck of the battlecruiser Atlas, Captain Darius Kane studied the holographic map in front of him. His sharp blue eyes were filled with exhaustion, but his posture remained firm. He had fought too many battles, seen too many human lives lost. The war was almost over, and humanity was losing. Just then, the silence was broken. "Captain," a young officer, Lieutenant Harris, turned from her station, her voice urgent. "We're receiving a distress signal. But you need to see this." Kane frowned. "Where is it coming from?" Harris hesitated. "Sector D47. Captain, it's coming from the Vengeance." The command deck fell silent. The name sent a chill through the air. "The Vengeance," Kane repeated, his voice low. "That ship was lost 100 years ago. Everyone knew the legend. The Vengeance was once the pride of the Terran fleet, a warship unlike any other, carrying experimental weapons. It had disappeared during the Battle of Andros Prime, presumed destroyed in combat. If it was still out there, it could change everything. Kane straightened. "Can we verify the signal?" "Yes, sir," Harris said. "It's old, but it's real. And Captain, it's calling for reinforcements." Kane didn't waste time. "Set course for Sector D47. Maximum speed." The engines of the Atlas roared to life, and within seconds, the ship jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the unknown. Hours later, the Atlas dropped out of hyperspace, arriving at the coordinates. But instead of an abandoned war zone, they found themselves above a desolate planet, covered in dust and ruins. "It doesn't look like a battleground," Kane muttered, staring at the lifeless surface below. Harris checked the scanners. No ships. No structures, just debris. "But the signal is definitely coming from down there." Kane made a decision. "Prepare a landing team. I want boots on the ground in 10 minutes. Minutes later, Kane, Harris, and a squad of Terran soldiers descended in a small shuttle. The ship rumbled as it entered the thin atmosphere, kicking up clouds of dust as it landed. The doors hissed open, revealing a graveyard of metal, wreckage from an ancient battle. The ground was littered with twisted remains of ships, human and alien alike. The silence was eerie, as if the planet itself held its breath. "Keep your weapons ready," Kane ordered, stepping forward. The team moved carefully through the wreckage, following the signal deeper into the ruins. Then one of the soldiers, Sergeant Vega, stopped. "Sir," he called out, pointing ahead. "You need to see this." Kane turned the corner and froze. In front of them stood a massive structure buried beneath layers of sand and rock. But through the dust, the shape was clear. A hangar bay. And inside, a ship. Kane's heart pounded. It was the Vengeance. The warship was intact, its dark metal hull untouched by time. It was as if it had been hidden here on purpose. Harris stared in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Before Kane could answer, a deep mechanical voice echoed from the hangar. "Access granted. Captain Darius Kane, welcome aboard." The crew whirled around, weapons raised. The voice had come from inside the ship. "The AI," Kane whispered. "It's still active." A low rumbling sound filled the air as the ship's entrance began to open. A ramp extended toward them, leading into the darkness inside. Kane stepped forward cautiously. "Move in. Stay sharp." One by one, the team ascended the ramp, their footsteps echoing through the silence. The moment they crossed the threshold, the ship came to life. Lights flickered on, revealing a fully operational bridge. The control panels hummed, data screens flashed, and the warship's core glowed with energy. It wasn't just intact, it was ready for battle. Then the voice returned. "Captain, you are late. We have a war to win." Before Kane could respond, An alarm blared. Harris checked her wrist display. Her face turned pale. "Captain, we got a problem." "Report," Kane demanded. "XR carry ships, 4 battlecruisers, just dropped out of hyperspace. They're scanning the surface. If they find us, we're dead." Kane's jaw clenched. The XR carry must have been tracking their movements. If they saw the Vengeance, they would destroy it before humanity even had a chance to use it. "We don't have much time," Harris warned. Kane looked around. The Vengeance was their only way out, but it hadn't been flown in a century. Could it still fight? He turned back to the ship's glowing interface. "Sentinel-09," Kane said, addressing the AI. "Can you get this ship running? Systems online. Weapons armed. Engines at 60% power. Shall we engage?" Kane nodded. "Then let's bring this warship back to life." The Vengeance rumbled beneath their feet as its ancient systems roared to life. Dust and time had settled over its frame, but deep inside, the warship had been waiting for this moment. Kane's fingers tightened into fists as he watched the holographic interface flicker, displaying old tactical data from a war long past. The AI, Sentinel-09, had not aged, its voice still crisp, its presence coldly efficient. "Captain, I have detected multiple hostile signatures in low orbit. XR carry battlecruisers are scanning for human presence. Their weapons are armed. If they locate us, they will annihilate this facility." Harris inhaled sharply. "We're not ready for a fight. The ship isn't fully operational yet." Kane's mind raced. They had 2 choices: attempt to fly the warship before it was fully powered, or stay hidden and risk being discovered. Either way, time was running out. Sergeant Vega checked his rifle and turned toward Kane. "Sir, I don't think the XR carry came here by accident. They were tracking someone, maybe even us. If they find us, they won't hesitate." Kane clenched his jaw. He knew Vega was right. The XR carry empire was ruthless. The moment they realized a legendary Terran warship had been recovered, they would obliterate the entire planet before letting humanity reclaim it. He turned back to the interface. "Sentinel-09, what's the status of our defenses?" "Primary weapons offline. Secondary turrets at 40% functionality. Shield generator at 30% capacity. Hyperdrive offline. Recommend immediate evasive action." "Not good. Not good at all." Harris ran a quick diagnostic. "We might be able to force a takeoff, but the thrusters are sluggish, and without shields, we'll be exposed." Kane exhaled sharply. "We don't have a choice. If they find us, this warship won't matter." Vega gave a grim nod. "Then let's get this beast in the air." Kane turned to the AI. "Start emergency launch procedures. Prepare the ship for immediate departure." The Vengeance came alive in a way none of them had expected. The deep hum of the engine cores sent vibrations through the warship's metal frame. Lights illuminated the control panels, displays adjusted to real-time battle mode, and systems that had been silent for a century came roaring back into action. The ground beneath them began to tremble as the ship's thrusters engaged. Suddenly, the comms crackled. A new voice, cold, calculating, alien. "Unidentified vessel, this is XR Carry High Commander Xerek. You are trespassing in restricted space. Identify yourself, or you will be eliminated." Harris looked up, her face pale. "They found us." Kane didn't hesitate. "Do not respond." The AI spoke. "Enemy ships have begun targeting scans. Detection imminent." Kane turned to his crew. "Strap in. We're taking off now." The Vengeance shook violently as its massive engines fought against the years of dormancy. Dust and debris scattered in all directions as the ground cracked beneath the force of the propulsion systems. The warship began to rise, slowly, painfully, but it was moving. Then the first energy blast came. A XR carry cruiser fired a plasma torpedo, and it slammed into the ground near the ship's hull, sending a massive shockwave through the landscape. The force nearly knocked Kane off his feet. "Shields," he barked. "30% and rising," Sentinel-09 replied. "Not enough to withstand a direct hit." Harris's fingers flew over the controls. "We need to get higher. Fast." Another explosion erupted, this time closer. The XR carry weren't waiting anymore. They were attacking. Then came the worst news. Enemy boarding parties detected. Hostile life forms approaching from the north entrance. Kane spun around. "They're trying to take the ship before we can launch." Vega's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then we hold the line." Kane nodded. "We hold the line." The lights flickered as the warship's defense turrets activated. Mechanical turrets descended from the walls, locking onto incoming XR carry soldiers. Then the first wave of aliens stormed through the breach. They were tall, armored, their black exoskeletons gleaming under the ship's artificial lights. Their glowing red eyes burned with hatred as they raised their plasma rifles. The battle for the Vengeance had begun. The warship Vengeance trembled as the battle raged within its ancient hull. Kane pressed against the bulkhead, his pulse racing as plasma fire streaked through the corridor. The XR carry warriors were relentless, their exoskeletons reflecting the dim emergency lighting as they advanced. Sergeant Vega, crouched behind a fallen console, shouted over the chaos. "They're pushing forward. We can't let them reach the bridge." Kane fired his rifle, the energy blast striking an alien in the chest. The creature stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, it snarled, raising its weapon with unnatural speed. Kane barely had time to react before Vega dropped it with a precise shot to the head. "We're losing ground," Harris warned from a nearby panel. She had been trying to override the security locks, sealing off sections of the ship to slow the invaders, but the warship's old systems weren't cooperating. The AI, Sentinel-09, spoke through the ship's comms, its voice eerily calm amid the chaos. "Enemy forces have breached secondary decks. Estimated time before they reach the command center: 8 minutes. Kane cursed under his breath. They had to hold out, but the XR carry were overwhelming them. Their weapons were advanced, their tactics ruthless. They weren't just trying to kill the human crew, they were trying to capture the warship intact. A sharp explosion rocked the deck, knocking Kane off balance. He landed hard against a support beam, his vision blurring for a moment. When he looked up, 2 XR carry warriors were charging straight for him. He reached for his weapon, but before he could fire, a massive force slammed into the aliens from the side. A figure, moving impossibly fast, tackled one of them to the ground, then twisted and drove a blade through the second warrior's throat. Kane's breath caught. It was Commander Rhea, their best hand-to-hand combat specialist. She had been missing since the first wave of the assault. "Thought you were dead," Kane said as he scrambled to his feet. Rhea smirked. "Not today." She pulled her blade free, wiping alien blood off her sleeve. "We've got bigger problems. There's a second wave coming from the maintenance tunnels." Kane barely had time to process this before Sentinel-09 cut in. "Warning. Enemy reinforcements detected. XR carry warlord approaching. Energy readings indicate high-level combat unit." Vega's face darkened. "A warlord? Here." Kane's stomach twisted. The XR carry warlords were infamous. Not just commanders, but genetically enhanced warriors. Faster, stronger, and nearly impossible to kill. Rhea tightened her grip on her weapon. "Then we need to end this now before he gets here." Kane nodded. "We have to take back the engine room. If we don't, they'll cut power to the main weapons, and this warship will be nothing but a floating coffin." Vega checked his ammo. "Then let's move before it's too late." They pushed forward, clearing the corridor inch by inch. The metallic scent of burnt plasma filled the air. The ship groaned as it strained against the damage, but it was still alive, just like them. Then, just as they reached the final bulkhead to the engine room, the temperature dropped. A strange pressure filled the air, making it harder to breathe. And then they saw him. The XR-carry warlord stepped through the smoke, his towering frame eclipsing the dim lights. His black armor gleamed, adorned with the skulls of past victims. His 4 glowing red eyes locked onto Kane and his team. He lifted his weapon, a plasma glaive that crackled with deadly energy. In a voice that was deep, guttural, and filled with malice, he spoke. "You are not worthy of this vessel. Surrender, and I will grant you a warrior's death." Kane tightened his grip on his rifle. No deal. The warlord lunged. The warlord moved with terrifying speed. One moment, he was standing in the smoke-filled corridor, towering, menacing, his plasma glaive humming with deadly energy. The next, he was charging. The air crackled as he swung his weapon in a wide arc, and Kane barely threw himself backward in time. The blade slashed through the metal bulkhead as if it were paper, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The impact shook the floor beneath them. "Fall back," Vega shouted, raising his rifle and firing a rapid burst of plasma rounds. The glowing shots struck the warlord's armor, but he barely flinched. Kane scrambled to his feet. He had fought XR-carry warriors before, but never a warlord. Their armor wasn't just metal. It was bioengineered, self-repairing, and could absorb an insane amount of damage. He had seen entire battalions fall to a single warlord before, and now they had to take this one down with only a handful of soldiers. Rhea didn't hesitate. She moved like a shadow, darting forward and slashing at the warlord's exposed joints with her vibroblade. The enhanced edge cut through his armor, drawing thick, dark blood. But instead of pain, the warlord laughed. Pathetic. He swung his glaive downward, nearly cleaving her in half. She twisted at the last second, but the force of the impact sent her crashing into the wall. Kane saw her hit the metal hard, her breath leaving her in a painful gasp. "Rhea." Kane tried to move toward her, but the warlord spun, grabbing Vega by the throat in one massive hand. The sergeant choked, kicking and struggling, but the warlord barely seemed to notice. "You fight like insects," the warlord growled, lifting Vega off the ground, as if he weighed nothing. His 4 red eyes gleamed with amusement. "Your species should have stayed in the shadows." Kane didn't think, he acted. His fingers found the thermal grenade strapped to his belt. He primed it in one swift motion and hurled it straight at the warlord's face. The explosion was deafening. A wave of heat and force rocked the corridor. The warlord staggered backward, finally releasing Vega, who dropped to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. Kane didn't stop to celebrate. "Move. Now." They fell back, dragging Rhea with them. The warlord emerged from the flames, his armor scorched but still intact. He was angry now, his posture shifting from amusement to pure predatory rage. Harris, who had been covering them from behind, shouted through the comms, "We can't hold this position. They're bringing in reinforcements." Kane cursed. The XR-carry weren't just sending in a warlord, they were sending an entire second wave. Then Sentinel-09's voice echoed through the comms. "Alternative strategy required. I have located a tactical advantage." Kane pressed his earpiece. "What are you talking about?" "The warship's primary weapons are offline, but the fusion core remains operational. If you can reach engineering, I can reroute power to the mass driver cannon." Kane's heart pounded. The mass driver cannon was a planet cracker, designed to punch through entire fleets. But there was a reason it wasn't already online. The ship's power grid was unstable. If they rerouted that much energy, they wouldn't just fire a weapon. It would turn the entire warship into a bomb. Vega wiped blood from his mouth. "Are you seriously suggesting we blow ourselves up just to take these bastards down?" "Negative," Sentinel-09 responded. "There is a 23% probability of full destruction. However, there is also a 77% probability that the explosion will only disable enemy forces while allowing for an emergency escape." "Not great odds," Harris muttered. Kane gritted his teeth. They didn't have time to debate. If they stayed, The warlord would tear them apart, and the XR carry reinforcements would wipe out the rest. This was their only shot. He looked at his team. Rhea was injured. Vega was barely standing. Harris was out of options. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for humanity's last hope. He made the call. "We're going to engineering." The warlord roared behind them, his voice filled with fury. And they ran. The air inside the warship was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Kane's boots pounded against the grated floor as he and his team raced through the darkened corridors, the distant sounds of enemy reinforcements growing louder behind them. Every step felt like a countdown to destruction. Rhea, still clutching her side from her earlier injury, kept pace, her face set in grim determination. Vega and Harris followed close behind, weapons raised, scanning every corner for an ambush. The warlord wasn't just chasing them, he was hunting them. Sentinel-09's voice cut through the comms. "Engineering is 5 levels below your current position. However, enemy forces have locked down primary access routes." Kane gritted his teeth. "Then give us another way." "Rerouting. Secondary maintenance shafts remain accessible. Warning: high probability of environmental hazards." "Of course there is," Vega muttered. They reached a junction where the main corridor stretched ahead, but it was already crawling with XR carry soldiers. "Back," Kane whispered harshly, pressing himself against the wall. The others followed suit. The enemy hadn't spotted them yet, but it wouldn't be long. Rhea glanced at the map on her wrist display. "We'll never make it through without being seen. The maintenance shafts are our only chance." Kane nodded. "Sentinel, where's the nearest access point?" 3 meters to your left." Kane turned to see a rusted hatch, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. He motioned for Vega and Harris to cover them, then yanked it open. The shaft reeked of ozone and old coolant leaks, the walls slick with condensation. Vega grimaced. "This is a death trap." "Not as bad as the alternative," Kane said, already climbing inside. One by one, the team followed, crawling through the narrow passageway, the metal creaking under their weight. Every sound seemed louder in the confined space, and Kane could only hope that XR carry weren't tracking them. Then the ship shuddered violently. "What the hell was that?" Harris hissed. "Enemy fleet has initiated bombardment. Shields at 32% integrity." Rhea cursed under her breath. "We don't have much time." They kept moving, the heat inside the shaft growing unbearable. Sweat dripped down Kane's face as he forced himself forward, ignoring the burning sensation in his arms. Finally, they reached a vertical drop. Below them lay the dimly lit expanse of engineering, and a dozen XR carry soldiers guarding the control terminals. Vega peered through the grate. Great, just great. Kane's mind raced. They couldn't afford a full-scale firefight. Not in their condition. Then an idea struck. It was risky, reckless, but it might work. He turned to Sentinel-09. "Are there any active power conduits in this sector?" "Affirmative. An overloaded conduit in Junction 4B could create a localized EMP burst." Kane smirked. "That'll do." He pulled a shock charge from his belt, modified it with a few quick adjustments, and tossed it down the shaft. A second later, boom! The explosion sent a ripple of electromagnetic energy through the chamber. The lights flickered, and the XR carry guards staggered as their weapons and armor momentarily shorted out. "Now," Kane barked. They dropped into the chaos, weapons ready. Rhea was the first to strike, driving her vibro blade into the nearest enemy's throat before he could react. Vega and Harris opened fire, cutting down soldiers in a barrage of plasma rounds. Kane moved like a shadow, weaving between stunned enemies, taking them down one by one. A brutal efficiency, a human resilience. In less than a minute, it was over. Kane rushed to the control console, his fingers flying over the interface. "Sentinel, reroute power to the mass driver cannon." Now. Processing. Energy transfer at 47%. Caution. System instability detected. Harris wiped sweat from his brow. How unstable. Margin of error, 18%. Increasing. Damn it. The ship trembled again. This time, something ruptured above them. A support beam collapsed, barely missing Vega. Rhea glanced at the display. We don't have time to second-guess this. Kane took a breath. They had one shot. If this failed, the warship would explode before they had a chance to escape. But if they succeeded, they could change the tide of the war. Do it, he said. The mass driver cannon roared to life, a deep, earth-shaking hum that resonated through the entire ship. The final battle had begun. The warship trembled as the mass driver cannon powered up, its core humming with a deep, ominous energy. The entire ship shook under the force, lights flickering, sparks bursting from overloaded conduits. Kane held onto the console, his jaw clenched. Energy levels at 82% and rising. Warning. Structural integrity compromised. Sentinel-09's voice echoed in his earpiece, but there was no turning back now. They had made their choice. Victory or destruction. No middle ground. Vega gripped the railing beside him. We need to fire before this thing tears us apart. Kane's fingers danced over the console, targeting the enemy flagship. The XR-carried dreadnought loomed outside the viewport, its massive silhouette illuminated by the burning wreckage of smaller ships. A voice cut through the comms, a deep, guttural snarl. Humans, you fight like vermin. Weak, scattered, and yet you cling to this ancient husk of a ship, believing it will save you. It was Warlord Tyreketh. His image flickered onto the cracked screen in front of Kane. A monstrous figure of armor and scars, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. This warship is a relic. It cannot stop what is coming. Kane stared him down. You sound nervous, Warlord. Tyreketh bared his sharp teeth in a grin. Nervous? No. Amused. Then, the enemy fleet shifted. Kane's heart stopped. Dozens of XR-carry ships began converging on them, forming a defensive blockade around the dreadnought. They knew what was coming. They knew the warship's power, and they were willing to sacrifice their own to stop it. Harris cursed. They're using their own ships as shields. Vega slammed his fist against the control panel. The blast won't reach the dreadnought if it hits the outer ships first. Kane's mind raced. If they fired now, the cannon's energy would disperse against the fleet's defensive formation. It would still do damage, but not enough. Not enough to win this war. Rhea, still clutching her wounded side, stepped forward. We need to get closer. Kane snapped his head toward her. Are you insane? If we move any closer, they'll rip us apart before we even fire. She met his gaze, unwavering. Then we take out their defenses first. The team fell silent. Vega exhaled. You're talking about a suicide run. Rhea didn't blink. No, I'm talking about leveling the playing field. Kane's mind raced. They had one option, but it was madness. A direct assault. If they could disable that XR-carry fleet's shields, the mass driver cannon would hit with full force, tearing through the blockade and striking the dreadnought. But to do that, they needed to launch a boarding assault, inside enemy lines. Kane took a breath. They had come too far to back down now. Sentinel, he said, his voice steady, calculate the fastest route to their shield generator. Analyzing. Completed. Launch bay access in 42 seconds. Stealth probability. Low. Survival probability. Uncalculated. Vega laughed dryly. That's reassuring. Kane turned to the team. You're up. We're finishing this fight. The airlock doors hissed open. Beyond them, chaos. Our carry fighters swarmed the battlefield, their pulse cannons lighting up the void. The enemy dreadnought loomed in the distance, its defenses bristling with energy. Kane and his team launched from the warship, thrusters burning as they raced toward the enemy vessel. Plasma fire streaked past them, explosions erupting in every direction. Vega spun midair, returning fire with deadly precision, taking out a pursuing fighter. Rhea's voice came through the comms. "Kane, we need to breach the outer hull. Fast." Kane locked onto the target. The dreadnought's ventral docking bay, the one weak spot in its defenses. Enemy fighters inbound. Multiple bogeys. Sentinel's warning came just as a squadron of XR carry ships broke off from formation, heading straight for them. Kane gritted his teeth. "Then let's give them a reason to be scared." The team accelerated toward the docking bay, weapons primed. The final battle had begun. The silence of space was shattered by the roar of plasma fire. Kane and his team hurtled toward the XR carry dreadnought, their thrusters burning bright against the void. The enemy fleet had shifted formation, desperately trying to close off their approach. Too late. Explosions erupted across the hull as the warship's artillery rained hell upon the enemy. Fighters spun wildly out of control, debris spiraling into the darkness. Hull breach in 10 seconds. Sentinel's voice echoed in their helmets. Kane tightened his grip on his rifle. Brace for impact. The team slammed into the dreadnought's outer hull, mag boots engaging instantly. They crouched low as the ship shook under enemy fire. Harris moved first, setting up a charge near the ventral airlock. Setting breach explosives. 5 seconds. The team formed a tight perimeter, rifles raised. The moment the doors blew, it would be chaos. A metallic whine filled the air. Then, boom. The airlock burst open, sending shrapnel flying. Kane and the others rushed inside, weapons hot. Alarms blared. The corridor ahead was dark, save for the flickering red emergency lights. The metallic walls were slick with oil and coolant, hissing from ruptured pipes. They moved fast, weapons raised. Every breath was measured, every step calculated. Suddenly, movement. A XR carry warrior lunged from the shadows, a curved blade in hand. Kane sidestepped, pulling the trigger, one clean shot to the skull. The alien collapsed, blood splattering against the wall. Vega cursed under his breath. "They know we're here." "Good," Kane muttered. "Let them come." They pushed deeper into the dreadnought's heart, following Sentinel's navigation. Their target, the central shield generator, was 2 levels below. But the XR carry weren't making it easy. Corridors flooded with enemy soldiers, plasma bolts cutting through the air. Kane and his team moved like ghosts, ducking behind cover, returning fire with brutal precision. Harris lobbed a grenade around the corner. Boom. The walls shook as the explosion ripped through a squad of Harkari. A guttural snarl rang out. A massive alien brute stomped into view, twice the size of a human, armored in thick plating. A warlord-class soldier. It raised a pulse hammer, bringing it down with earth-shattering force. The deck cracked beneath the impact, sending shockwaves through the floor. Kane rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the strike. "Hit it with everything," he shouted. Rhea fired a high-energy round into the brute's chest. The armor barely cracked. Vega cursed. "It's got reinforced plating." Kane's mind raced. They couldn't waste time here. Every second they spent fighting this thing, the fleet outside was getting closer to total destruction. His eyes flicked to the coolant pipes running along the ceiling. An idea struck. "Rhea, target the pipe above its head." She didn't hesitate. One shot, dead center. The pipe exploded, releasing a torrent of supercooled gas. The brute staggered, its armor frosting over instantly. Kane moved in. One precise shot to the skull. The alien collapsed, its massive body slamming into the deck. "Move," Kane barked. They reached the core chamber moments later. It was massive. A cathedral of humming energy, pulsing with raw power. In the center stood the shield generator, its core glowing like a trapped star. But they weren't alone. Zyraketh stood at the control panel, waiting. The warlord of the XR carry, his armor gleaming under the red light, his eyes burning with fury. Kane lifted his rifle. "Step away." Zyraketh laughed. "You humans never learn. You fight. You struggle. But in the end," he moved like lightning, drawing a plasma blade. Kane barely had time to react. Zyraketh was on him, blade slicing through the air. Kane blocked with his rifle, but the force sent him skidding backward. The warlord was strong, inhumanly fast. Vega fired. Zyraketh dodged effortlessly, closing the distance. He kicked Vega aside like a ragdoll. Harris charged, swinging his combat knife. A fatal mistake. Zyraketh's blade pierced his chest. Harris choked, blood spilling from his mouth. Zyraketh ripped the blade free, letting the human crumple to the floor. Kane saw red. "Rhea, take the shot." Rhea fired. The bullet struck the warlord's shoulder, but he didn't fall. He turned to Kane, grinning. "Is this all humanity has?" Kane lunged, drawing his own combat knife. He ducked beneath the next strike, slashing deep into Zyraketh's side. The warlord roared in pain, staggering.